As Toyota continues to dominate the 2026 NASCAR season, Brad Keselowski alludes to why Ford is partially behind. Plus, Austin Hill or Noah Gragson? What does RCR do for the 33 next year? How's it going, y'all? Welcome back to the Breaking Bob channel on this Tuesday edition. I am back in the home base, back at the studio after somewhat rested and recovered after a long weekend out at Joliet, Chicagoland. It was a great weekend, though. Great to meet a lot of y'all, and it's just really cool to see NASCAR back at the Oval in Joliet. Of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I always talk NASCAR on a daily basis. We've got a lot to get into. Of course, this weekend at Chicagoland, the beef that was SVG and Austin Hill. The quote I had from him at the end of the race, done pretty well. That's caught some waves. And of course, Zane Smith, also with Carson Hocevar, had an incident early in that race that hadn't really been touched on. But of course, this is Tuesday. You would think at least this afternoon, maybe Wednesday morning, depending on when NASCAR rules on it, will we see any sort of penalty or repercussions for those incidents? Of course, the main one is the SVG Austin Hill one. But Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar with their history as well, going back to, I believe, Iowa. The thing is, with these incidents on Sunday, there's really no radio that says there was any buildup or any intention toward doing this. Of course, you can see the video and say what you want, but in the case of Ryan Preece, at Texas with Ty Gibbs, there was radio that said there was intent to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's any repercussions from this. I don't think so. I think you let drivers police it, but again, with the precedents they set with Ryan Preece at Texas, it does at least leave the door open for something for either Smith or Van Gisbergen moving forward. But again, just something to watch as we head to Atlanta this weekend, if those retaliations will be on track or if NASCAR will try and curb it early. But again, a packed video, so let's just jump right in, because part of the reason that SVG is in that incident with Austin Hill is now running Cup Series racing. And of course, after everything that's unfolded with RCR and the passing of Kyle Busch, just unfortunate, just emotional circumstances. But the 33, the business of the sport has to move on. And of course, everyone wants to know, is it going to be Austin Hill full-time in that 33? And you do have Noah Gragson. Also, it sounds like rumored as a contender between the two rides. So, Noah Gragson could be out at Front Row Motorsports. But really, when you look at it, Austin Hill or Noah Gragson, what should RCR really do? Personally, you can look at it two ways. You can look at the case for Austin Hill, familiarity. Of course, longtime O'Reilly Series driver with him after being tapped now to take over in that 33 for the rest of the 2026 season, partially because of sponsorship affiliations, a lot of adult sponsorships with gambling, nicotine, liquor. Austin Hill looks like he's over 25 because he is. That was part of the reason Jesse Love wasn't in there, among other reasons of silly season. But it's familiarity. It could also make it an easy stopgap because Austin Hill, you would think, isn't looking for a long-term contract. He's just wanting to get an opportunity in the Cup Series, especially with RCR. So, it's an easy way to bridge the gap if they're looking for something bigger in 2028. And also Austin Hill, it's weird to say he's a veteran driver because he is, but also he has a lot of incidents that, make him a guy that people are kind of timid around one way or the other. But that being said, yes, he is a veteran driver in the garage. So that would be another way, again, just to kind of bridge that gap. But the big thing, though, if you do promote Austin Hill full-time in 2027, is RCR would have to completely overhaul their O'Reilly Series program. And I know Cup Series takes precedent, but that's where their success has been the last few years, historically, is in the O'Reilly Series. Of course, Jesse Love moving on to the Wood Brothers. If you move Austin Hill up, well, then both your cars are going to be open. That's a big change just to overhaul your entire program after a lot of stability the last few years. Now, of course, Carson Brown, who right now is running ARCA and short tracks, is likely going to be one of those drivers full-time next year, you would think, as of course he has the development deal with RCR. But outside of that, you would have to fill that other role. And there's a lot of moving pieces that, the stability of RCR is so big for them. Austin Hill's been a key cog in that. So, you would think he's going to be the RCR one way or the other next year. But if it's not Austin Hill in that 33, all signs point to front rows Noah Gragson being that driver. Of course, Bob Pockrass has talked about him being a candidate as well. He's a great culture fit. Noah Gragson is this blue collar, still, brash young guy that just kind of fits the environment that RCR has. Of course, the guys up and welcome kind of on their own. Some people have talked about the environment and the culture up there is very different compared to the rest of the NASCAR garages closer to the hub of Charlotte, but it just makes a fit there. And of course, the sponsorship with Bass Pro Shop, Noah Gragson, a long time, deal with them, whether it was with Dale Jr. in the O'Reilly then Xfinity series. Johnny Morrison loves Noah Gragson, and Johnny Morrison loves Richard Childress, a longtime sponsor with RCR, so would make perfect sense to fit that. Of course, you always have to follow the money. It's NASCAR at the end of the day. But the other thing to consider is he would also fill that, I don't want to say fill the void of Kyle Busch as far as marketing and sponsorship and just fan-wise, because Kyle Busch is Kyle Busch. That was a big reason that RCR was going to keep Kyle Busch, was he brought the sponsorship. He was very popular with fans, merchandise sales. That is something that Noah Gragson brings to the table. Of course, sponsorships like I talked about, but just the fan relationship, the image he brings, the on-track results, yes, they are what they are, but Noah Gragson is a fan favorite and driver favorite in the garage. He's a glue guy, it feels like, for a lot of people. So, you've seen him win the most popular driver in the All-Star Open vote a lot of the last few years. So, look, I'm not saying that Noah Gragson is a perfect fit for RCR, because you look at his on-track results, he's DNF prone, and his Cup Series career, the results are what they are. But there is a talented driver inside Noah Gragson. As you look at him in his O'Reilly campaign, and every now and then he does show flashes. It's just a maturity thing, and equipment-wise too for Noah Gragson, consistency. But the talent is there. The speed has been there in his career in the past. So again, between Austin Hill, Noah Gragson, there's a lot of variables for sure. If it's up to me, I would go Austin Hill just to keep that synergy. I know you're going to have to rebuild your entire O'Reilly Series program, but it just gives you a lot more future flexibility for Austin Hill. If it goes well in 27, you can extend him for longer term, but if it doesn't, well, then you can look elsewhere for 2028, and you're not rebuilding. Whereas if you're going with Noah Gragson, it's likely a multi-year deal, and you're kind of set with your driver lineup of Austin Dillon and Noah Gragson for at least the next 2 years likely. But again, let me know what you think down below. Austin Hill or Noah Gragson for the RCR 33? Which driver do you want to see in that ride full-time next year? Of course, one of the other big topics this weekend out of Chicago, and this was on Friday, Brad Keselowski's media availability, where he was talking about the OEM relationships, how Toyota has just taken a stranglehold over the field this year, and how Ford has been lacking behind, and part of the reason is collaboration. Now, again, on Friday, Keselowski alluded to the change in the garage around 2020, 2021, the dynamic that shifted from the teams toward manufacturers and OEMs really running the info and the engineering side. And of course, part of that was, he said, just to curb teams like Furniture Row from coming in and, quote, throwing money at a championship. Now, Brad didn't think that that's what they did, but they did put a lot of resources in there. And then the next year, they weren't on the grid because Joe Gibbs Racing raised the technical alliance just to really squeeze them out of the sport. Toyota lost a championship team, but they've learned from that, it seems. As you look at that now, Brad has talked about just how OEMs have their favorites now. And you look at Ford, Penske, RFK, Front Row, they're tier one teams. You look at Hendrick, you look at Chevrolet, you've got Hendrick Motorsports, RCR Trackhouse are all, in theory, tier one there. But they all have their favorites for sure, except for Toyota with 2311 Joe Gibbs Racing and Legacy all right there. They are right now pushing collaboration between them all, Brad says. And he goes into a little bit more detail here that I want to just let him talk about this because he can explain it better. So here's Brad Keselowski Friday on Toyota's collaboration and what Ford is lacking.
And I'll give a lot of credit to Toyota for this, is they've recognized that stalemate is not necessarily good for the sport or for them as an OEM, and they've done a lot of things to push elite collaboration amongst their top organizations so that they have, for reference, two kind of A organizations rather than A, B, and C. As I've seen to date, the other OEMs have not done that. And Toyota is making them pay for that with results on the racetrack. They deserve credit for that. It's a really great behind-the-scenes move that they've taken full advantage of in a way that is legal and probably should be. The challenge that I see is, will the other two OEMs actually kind of, react to that? I haven't seen that at the moment. I think RFK is doing all the things it needs to do to position itself to be successful if that were to happen, particularly in the Ford camp. But at this point, we have not seen the level of collaboration at Ford that we see at Toyota. You know, we're having one of these seasons where it looks like Toyota is going to dominate throughout. And there's a great argument to be made that they're winning races in the boardroom with really great decision making. You know, as it works its way specifically into RFK, I think we've proven our merit. We have 3 teams that are in a position that I'm proud of. I think if you're going to beat Toyota, you have to have at least 2 elite organizations collaborating at very, very high levels and sharing the elite resources that are specific to the OEM. And I only see Toyota doing that right now.
So right there, it just sounds like Ford needs to reevaluate everything. And of course, you look at the Penske RFK relationship, they need to work together front row as well with now their resources as a tier 1 organization in theory. But that being said, it just goes to show that there is a big gap in the discourse between teams like Toyota or OEMs like Toyota and Ford and how they're operating currently. Now, Denny Hamlin also spoke Friday and said that, yes, 2311 gives a lot of money towards Joe Gibbs Racing, and it works out for everyone because Joe Gibbs Racing has another team that they can get info off of, while Joe Gibbs Racing is getting the money resources on that side financially from 2311. So it's a rising tide that lifts all ships. But also on Door Bumper Clear yesterday, Tommy Baldwin said that Legacy Motor Club now could be getting a little bit part of that information now. Of course, years ago when they joined Toyota, they were doing it on their own with their own book, not any resources from JGR like 2311 had kind of siphoned away a little bit. Now, Legacy Motor Club, it sounds like, is joining the Toyota research with Joe Gibbs Racing. As Baldwin says, quote, now it's starting to happen in Legacy. They're sending people over there for the systems to be done correctly. You've seen a big jump in the last month and a half because they've sent some people from Gibbs over to Legacy. They've changed their philosophy and a way to look at things because now you have somebody that was ingrained in Gibbs that's learned all the secrets, but all the systems, and now they're getting applied to Legacy. And then you think next year with Legacy Motor Club expanding to a 3rd full-time car, their resources will be maximizing even further. So again, Toyota is really changing the game as far as the next-gen era. Of course, with it being, all stock parts and pieces now, it's not manufactured by the teams. You have to look differently. You have to change the game. You have to adapt or you die. And Toyota has adapted while the rest of the field, you look at Hendrick and Spire on the Chevy side, they have a slight alliance there, and you can see it helps Spire for sure the last year or two with speed. But Toyota has really changed the game, and it's up to the garage to whether they want to adapt, like Brad Keselowski said, because if you're Ford, you really need Penske and RFK working together to get your resources together. Of course, you're battling your competition, but at the end of the day, if you're spending the same amount of money on the research that RFK is in Penske, while Toyota is collaborating there, you're at a disadvantage. And so it's just a major mind shift in the NASCAR world currently. But again, times have changed, and I'm very curious to see if this is something that you see more with collaboration, or if Toyota just becomes the new normal and the rest of the field has to figure out something else. Again, adapt or die is what I say. That's what the NASCAR garage has been for the last 50 years. And this is just another different change in the world, but it's something that hearing Brad Keselowski talk about that very candidly this weekend, it really, you can see it on track. So again, let me know what you think down below about the OEM status with the collaboration, what you want to see between NASCAR teams moving forward. And again, a lot to break down today with potentially some penalties coming down, or I don't think so, but SVG and Zane Smith. And then of course the RCR silly season move for next year. But a loaded video today on this Tuesday as I get back into normal swing this week. I'll be at the track in Atlanta though this weekend. So if you're out there, make sure to say hi. It's going to be a fun weekend. I've never been down there, and the racing since the configuration change has just been so good that yeah, it's going to be a fun weekend, I think, down in Georgia. But again, until then, make sure if you like what you saw to like this video, subscribe to Breaking Bob for more NASCAR content daily. And until then, we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.